Good evening, Colleen. I hope you had a pleasant couple of days here.
We've had a lot of rain, thank you, but we needed it.
Yeah, I think we probably could use a little more than we've had. I'm not complaining right now, but we had a very wet spell for a bit there, but we're still mostly dry. So, all right, well, looks like it is time here. And there were supposedly other people going to sign up, but I never got email from them confirming they were signing up. So I think it's just you and me yet tonight. So I can get started.
Okay. I am going to mute. Thank you.
I'm dictating chapters of a story that will eventually end up on Kindle Vella. And while I'm doing that, I am getting my exercise on my treadmill. So I get to kill two birds with one stone. Hopefully none of the birds killed is me. I've got all the safety equipment on my treadmill, so I should be fine. So let us get started. Start the recorder. Start the treadmill. Raise the elevation up to where I like it. And get the speed up. My starting speed, 2 miles an hour. And I am ready to get going in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. ... New line, new line. Note to self, colon, go back and have Knighton observe. Has a sense that the mystery is going to be important farther down the road, period. New line. New line. Just after 1200 local time, comma, I pulled the crawler to a halt, comma, grabbed my helmet, comma, and dropped back into the main compartment, period. I turned to Ames, period. We're halted, comma, Captain, period. New line. He looked up at me with a glare, period. I'm not your captain, comma. Remember, question mark, new line. Internally, comma, I kicked myself, period. In his legend, comma, he would always be Captain Nick Ames of the Auburn Express and the Bradbury mission, period. And I'd fallen into the old trap of thinking of the legend, comma, not the situation now, period. My apologies, comma, instructor, period. New line. Don't waste your breath apologizing, period. Read, period. He looked over at Kim Reed on her travel couch, period. Are you ready to take the wheel, question mark? New line. Yes, comma, instructor, period. New line. Well, comma, let's take a quick break, period. Grab some rations, period. And each of you grab some time at the viewports, period. Take some notes, period. I want your observations of the terrain outside. Sorry, comma, my internet dropped out. New line. Ames continually hammered home, colon. Factor in survival was awareness, comma, of your surroundings and your resources and your abilities, period. After 15 weeks, comma, we didn't need any more instructions, period. We grabbed our comps, comma, crowded around the ports, comma, and started making notes, period. New line. I shared a port with Deidre Hopewell, comma, the biologist, period. It was large enough for us both to look out, comma, but not to get a really good view, comma. So we took turns at the port, period. While I was looking out, comma, Hopewell asked, comma, so did Holmes give you any idea where we're going, question mark? New line. I was glad for all my years as a reporter, period. I could listen and take notes at the same time, comma, and even give the appearance of taking part in the conversation, comma, only stopping my note-taking if I needed to give an answer in depth, period. This wasn't one of those times, comma, so I simply answered, comma, he's still tight-lipped, period. The court, comma, just veering around the chasma, period. New line. North, question mark. That's a change, period. All our past exercises were in the chasma area, period. New line. I was describing the cracked terrain around us, comma, and how the wouldn't be much of an exercise if we just did what we've done before, period. That's just drill, period. New line. True, comma, she answered, period. Can I get a turn? Question mark. New line. That was good reporter style, comma, and good survival school training, period. Your life could depend on these people, period. More than that, comma, it was just plain good human, period. I stepped back after snapping some photos with my comp, period. New line. She moved forward and began snapping photos of her own, period. I don't know why you wasted time on the sketches, comma, she said, period. I just do them later from the pictures, period. New line. I bit my tongue, comma, stopping myself from asking, comma, then why even take the pictures, question mark. Just use the mission logs, question mark. Instead, comma, I answered her question, period. It's a different way of thinking about what you're seeing, period. To draw the pictures, comma, I have to pay attention in a different way, period. If I do that from the photos later, comma, it's not the same experience, period. I mean, comma, it's useful, comma, but not in the same way as when it's now, period, immediate, period. New line. I don't see the difference, comma, she said, comma, but I noticed her making a quick sketch, period. New line. It's the way I've always done it, period. Video, comma, notes, period. I get and oh, comma, make sure you look at the fracturing of the terrain, period. That's going to be important, period. New line. I know but I saw her adding sketches of the fractures to her comp, period. New line. From what I've learned, comma, Hopewell was a pretty good scientist in her field, period. She'd written several papers on the adaptation of human biology to Martian living conditions, period. She'd been written up in multiple journals, period. But observations like this were geology, period. orienteering, comma, even, period. It was in her zone, comma, and it seemed to bother her, period. Even after 15 weeks in the class, comma, she was having trouble adopting Ames's attitude that it's all data, comma, all research, period. It all matters to the big picture. New line. I couldn't blame her, comma, though, comma, for feeling a little bit of an outsider, period. Despite the discovery of fossil remains, fossil microbes, Martian strata, comma, there still was no science of Martian biology, period. In her field, comma, at least among those working here on Mars, period, period. And the sciences still had a prejudice towards colon. The longer you went without making your big mark, comma, the more some people doubted you ever could, period. She'd said one time that even coming out to Mars was a career risk, period. Wiser folks in her field years, period. She'd come anyway, comma, so I gave her points for spirit, period. But now, comma, that wistful look in her eye when I got her talking about the progress or lack thereof in discovering Martian life gave me the feeling that she was regretting her decision, period. New line. But she never said as much, semicolon. And I'm a reporter, comma, not a psychoanalyst, period. What I notice isn't what I've confirmed, period. And what I noticed for the most part was she did have good habits for work and for observation when she remembered to bring them to bear, period. New line. I wonder how far north we'll go, comma, she said, period. New line. I shrugged, comma, and I pictured colon. Holmes had drilled us repeatedly on major geographic and geological features of Mars, period. You've got to know your territory, comma, he said, period. You've got to know where you're lost in order to know how to survive, period. Martinez had asked him how you can be lost to know where you're at, comma, and had gotten a homework assignment on Martian navigation, period. We all got that eventually, period. Besides the easy part, comma, navigation satellites in the sky, comma, any night sky had Phobos and Deimos going across on a predictable schedule. And you could figure out your longitude from there, period. Latitude was pretty much the same as it had been calculated on Earth since the earliest sailing vessels, comma, and before, period. Donahue had grumbled at having to learn primitive navigation, comma, but I never loved enough that Ames could hear him, period. New line. I don't know, comma, I answered. Read, period, or Hopewell, period. Keep my name straight there, dot, dot, dot. I had my suspicions, comma, but again, I kept them to myself, period. We'd been going pretty much straight north for over 3 days now, comma, as the terrain and the chasms allowed, period. I didn't think that was going to change, period. New line. Hopewell, comma, though, comma, wasn't afraid to speculate, period. I think we're going to the fill in the blank, period. The word I just had on the tip of my tongue, comma, and now I can't remember it. Yes. Dot, dot, dot. I think we're going to the dichotomy, period. New line. It could be, comma, I agreed, period. It was exactly what I concluded, period. The dichotomy was that stretch of the Martian terrain between the northern hemisphere and the southern, period. To be more accurate, comma, the northern third of the planet and the southern 2/3, comma, more or less, period. The southern hemisphere Mars And I'm back. And we were talking about the dichotomy, period. There were theories about what caused the difference between the two hemispheres, semicolon. But in more than a generation of humans, no one theory had yet won general acceptance, period. Some said a massive asteroid impact had shattered the northern hemisphere, comma, liquefying the rock until a lava sea settled down, comma, too recent in geological history for significant meteor strikes to pockmark the area with craters, period. Others, dash, dash, and this one I had more trouble understanding, dash, dash, said almost the opposite, period, colon, that an impact in the southern hemisphere had propagated pressure waves that had emerged the other side and liquefied the far side of the planet, period. Again, in recent geological history, comma, long before any human imagined visiting the red planet, period. That one made no sense to me, comma, but the planetologists, like Martinez, assured me that there was evidence for it, period. That anywhere you found a large impact crater on Mars, comma, you would find a massive volcanic plateau nearly 180 degrees around the planet, period. I thought that seemed like coincidence, comma, even superstition, period. But I don't let Martinez tell me how to do my reporting, comma, so I'm not going to judge his planetology, period. New line. But the dichotomy was the name for the zone where the two hemispheres met, comma, a wavy line circling back and forth between the two all around the planet, period. I'd seen satellite photos and expedition videos, comma, but few on Mars ever actually saw it, period. Most human settlement was in the southern hemisphere, comma, around the mountains or in large craters such as fill in the blank, comma, where they sometimes still found liquid water in the right time of year when the temperature was, period. Those were most interesting to the scientists I talked to, period. New line. Hopewell continued. I think that's it, period. I mean, comma, this expedition is scheduled period. new line. What she said made sense, period. But I wasn't going to talk about it here in the big public compartment, period. It was one thing to speculate in a tent at night, comma. It was another to speculate where Ames and Holmes could listen in, period. They had reasons for their secrets, semicolon. And prying was no way to get on their good side, period. So I just nodded and made encouraging noises, period. New line. Hopewell continued, comma. I'd really like it if we're going into the Northern Hemisphere, period. I could run experiment there, period. The crust is shallower there, period. And the permafrost, dash, dash, especially this time of year, comma, the permafrost is closer to the surface, period. I could take some core samples, comma, and run some organic experiments in virgin territory, period, new line. I tutted, period. I don't remember core drilling being part of the expedition equipment, period, new line. At that, comma, Hopewell turned back and smiled, period. Not in the official equipment, comma, but a drill and core tubes were within my mass allowance for the trip, period. Here, comma, your turn, period. She pulled away from the window again, period. As I moved back to the port, comma, I nodded, comma, with a new appreciation for Hopewell's persistence, period. Yes, comma, a core drilling rig might be barely within her mass allowance, comma, if she brought nothing else larger than her kit bag, period. If she actually came prepared for that, comma, well, comma, she was determined to play biologist, comma, wherever we went, period. I started hoping for her sake that we were going to the dichotomy, comma, so she'd get a chance to make use of that equipment, period. New line, new line. When Reed brought us to a halt that evening, comma, I confirmed on the map, colon, and a nearly direct northerly course, period. I think Hopewell and I were both onto something, period. New line. Holmes unbuckled from his travel couch and stood before us, period. All right, comma, ladies and gentlemen, comma, get your 10 assignments, comma, and make camp, period. He checked his comp, period. We've got 4 hours of usable daylight, period. If you can't get set up in that time, comma, you're in the wrong course, period. New line. Check the mission computer, period. My tent mate for that night would be Lisa Taylor, comma, the forensic data scientist from Police Chief Mirage's surveillance team, period. Holmes and Ames made sure 10 assignments were random every night, comma, so we each had a chance to get to know everyone else in the team, dash, dash. If 15 weeks in class hadn't gotten us to know each other already, period. They shuffled things around every night, period, just to be sure, period. New line, new line. Taylor and I carried the tent out period. Ames was standing out on the regolith, comma, pointing towards camping sites, period. I saw no signs of boot prints other than his, comma, no signs of crawler tracks other than ours, period. It looked as if no one but us had ever been to this locale, semicolon. But experienced Mars hands know better than that, period. One good windstorm could bury any tracks, comma, or just blow them away, period. The Martian winds were fast, comma, yet deceptively gentle, period. With air pressure 1,000th that of Earth, comma, you could stand in a hurricane force Martian storm, comma, and never even feel any pressure, period. But you wouldn't see a thing, period. Not if there were any dust in the area at all, period. Martian sand is really mostly dust, comma, finer than talcum powder, period. A wave of your hand would send a pile of it flying, period. But in any good storm, comma, there was so much of it in the air that you completely lost visibility, period. So just because the sand around us was untracked didn't mean that 1,000 people hadn't marched through here the week before, period. New line. We carried the tent to our assigned space, comma, and set it down, period. Then Taylor went back to get the air pack. While I inspected the surface, period. New line. Soon I saw trouble, comma, and I signaled Taylor on our private channel, period. Taylor, comma, Knighton, period. You read, question mark, new line. Knighton, comma, Taylor, period. I read, period, go, period. New line. Taylor, comma, Knighton, period. Check inventory, period. See if we have any extended stakes, period. New line. Knighton, comma, Taylor, period. Extended stakes, question mark. As in tent stakes, question mark. New line. Maybe not label as much, scratch that. Taylor, comma, Knighton, period. Maybe not labeled as such, comma. Check the inventory, period. We're going to need them, period. About 2 minutes later, colon, Knighton, comma, Taylor, period. A box of extra long stakes, period. Anchor stakes, comma, they're called, period. New line. Taylor, comma, Knighton, period. Anchor is right, period. I'm on my way, period. Get 20, period. And see if there's a power hammer, period. New line. I set off back to the crawler, period. The ground was even more broken up than I'd seen at lunch, period. We're going to have to sink the stakes deep. Secure the tents, period. I know what I said, comma. The winds aren't strong enough to blow anything around bigger than powder, comma. but it never hurts to take extra caution, period. There might be, comma, I don't know, comma, maybe a hopper come to visit, comma, and the wash might blow on her tents. Survival was about what you didn't expect as much as what you did, period. New line. As I neared the crawler, comma, I saw the green and yellow striped excursion suit of Hopewell, period. Her arms were full of long stakes, comma. So she couldn't make any pictures, and I couldn't see through her helmet visor, period. But she made a little bob of acknowledgement, comma, and I bobbed back, period. She'd remembered her sketches, period. New line, new line. We were inside our tent and finishing our inspection, comma, before Taylor finally brought up the topic of the stakes, period. Good call, period. Donahue and Reed both got punishment assignments for being the last ones to get the long anchors, period. New line. I shrugged, period. Somebody has to be last, period. New line. But it wasn't us, period. Good call, period. Thanks, period. New line. I finished inspecting my suit, comma, closed the lid on the hard case, comma, and sat down, period. You would have picked it up eventually. You've got good marks and observation, period. New line. Thanks, period. She sat, period. But it's still, It doesn't come easy to me, period. New line. What doesn't? Question mark. New line. She opened her duffel, comma, pulled out a couple of ration packs, comma, and tossed one to me, period. Observing things in the physical world, period. I'm so used to having all of my data tools, comma, intrusion sensors, comma, counter surveillance, comma, and so on, period. I'm used to seeing through my tech, period. New line. I looked at the ration bar, period. It was curry soy, period. I wondered if I should heat it up, comma, but I didn't imagine it would help the taste any, period. Instead, comma, I unwrapped it and took a bite, period. New line. Definitely survival rations, comma, I said, period. You'll survive on it, comma. Just don't have high expectations, period. New line. Taylor smiled back, period. I kind of like them, period. De gustibus, comma, I answered, period. New line. She swallowed, comma, and then continued, comma. It's just da. I know where everything is in the computer, period. In network space, period. I don't know where things are around me, period. New line. I knew I should shut up and listen, period. It was good character background research, period. But I couldn't help myself, period. Test, period. Yeah, comma, but not as well as Donahue and Reed, period. Not as not as well as you, period. New line. I tried to think how to argue with her, period. It wasn't good to have a teammate with a crisis of confidence when lives were on the line, period. And even though this is only an exercise, comma, aims at beating it into us, colon. Any expedition can turn into a crisis, comma, especially if you don't expect it, period. New line. So I, look, comma, I can't do what you do, period. That whole visualization thing you do, where the entire problem is sort of arrayed in and around your head in data space, period. New line. She looked at me, period. How did you know that? Question mark. New line. I've interviewed enough programmers and data security tasks to know how they describe it, period. Oh, comma, it's all different, comma, but the core is the same, colon. In their heads, comma, they see pieces coming together. Question mark. So close, exclamation point, new line. Close enough for someone like me who doesn't have to actually do it, comma, right? Question mark. She nodded, period. Well, comma, if you really talk to us, comma, that's how every one of us here does our job, period. We just do it with different tool sets, period. With Hopewell, it's biological reactions, period. With Martinez, comma, it's planetary physics and geology, period. With Donahue, comma, it's suspects and crowds, period. We all do the same sort of thing, period. And what we all do, I paused, period. She looked at me, period. What we all do, question mark, new line. Look, comma, Holmes and Ames haven't told me their secrets, comma, but I've talked to enough drill sergeants and scientists, period. We're all doing the same sort of problem solving, just with different domains and tools, period. We're all looking for what stands out, comma, what doesn't fit, comma, and what's around it to give it context, period. It's the mystery of the dead cat, period. New line. What? Question mark. New line. The dead cat, period. It's an exercise from the earliest spaceflight days, comma, Apollo training, period. If I tell you that I have a dead cat, you know nothing. If it's a forest, you guess the cat got lost or got attacked by a predator, period. New line. She grinned, period. And if it's a Chinese restaurant, new line. I grinned back, period. You have heard the story, period. New line. Yeah, comma, once you got into it, period. New line. So you're bringing observation skills that you use in your work into a different context, period. You just have to learn that context, comma, until suddenly the dead cats start talking to you, period. Then it will all make sense, period. New line. New line. All right, we are at 58 minutes on the treadmill, an hour on the meeting. So let me cut off the recording. I've got a minute and a half to get my full hour on the treadmill. So I will finish that out. Another night where I wasn't sure where it was going, but I liked what I was learning about the characters more than I knew about either Hopewell or Taylor before, comma, so that's good. All right, less than a minute left. 20 seconds. 10 seconds to landing. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right. And I liked your suggestion last night that I might as well use the Q&A period for cool down. So I won't quite stop the treadmill yet. I'll just take it down to, that's a little too slow, 0.4 miles per hour. I feel like the world is in slow motion. Let's put it back at 1, barely moving. All right, let me grab some water and ask again how your day's going and if you had any questions.
Oh, no, I really enjoyed it. I got a couple laughs, I gotta admit. Curried soy.
And an interesting thing, because as you know from the last campaign, they have some gardening, they have a small amount of animal farming. They probably should have more fish than I showed in that book, because aquaculture is supposed to be one of the easier ways to grow protein in space. And I haven't actually shown any fish fats, but I'll bet there are fish fats in the vicinity of the tomb and the recycling, that probably some of the material that comes out of recycling goes into fish fats, as well as algae fats and such.
Right.
I probably need some good education on closed loop ecologies. Right now, you're getting sort of what I remember from other people's fiction. So I probably should do some research on that, because when I do research, what I always find is it becomes part of the story eventually. Now, there's 3 possibilities there. One is I always needed it and just didn't know it. One is I needed it and knew it somewhere. It's amazing how many times I will have that suddenly something doesn't fit and I have to go research. And when I go do the research, it's not something I ever really, but apparently maybe I did and had forgotten it, and the research brings it back up.
Yep.
I don't know if you've had a chance to read Unrefined lately. It opens with sabotage at a big space station at the fusion plant.
Oh.
And it was going to open with a big horrendous explosion as the fusion plant blew up. And when I tried to write that scene, I said, something seems wrong here. I don't know what it is, but I need to educate myself. And when I did the reading on it, on various sources about fusion, what I discovered is, short of a hydrogen bomb, there's no fusion reaction that we can make explode. Because fusion is so difficult and so finicky that as soon as it starts to go wrong, the whole fusion reaction collapses. It's not like fission, where in some reactors, you can get a runaway chain reaction. With fusion, as soon as it's out of balance, you lose the reaction.
Right.
But then as I found out that that can be almost as bad as an explosion, because all of your magnets and all of your coils and everything that you had to try to keep the fusion in balance, immediately goes out of balance, because the material it's supposed to be operating on isn't there anymore. And what happens then is you don't get an explosion, you get the fusion containment system and the control system tearing itself apart into fast-moving shards of metal and coils and everything else. So you don't get a nuclear explosion. What you get, and what you get in Find is the opening of that story, is those flying shards of shrapnel are pretty lethal in their own right.
Right.
I don't know where I knew that, but somehow when I was writing that scene, the
Sorry.
So the research almost always gets into the story at some point along one of those three paths.
Sorry, I lost you for a second. I was going to say the fish, for some reason, I keep thinking of the fish in aquifers as nibbling the roots of plants. Usually they put the two of them together, but don't ask me where that comes from.
Yeah, but you got to have a balance in the ecology somewhere there.
Yeah.
And learn what that is.
Yeah, but yes, boy, you make me think about CERN. I've read articles about those magnets. I wouldn't want that to blow up, boy.
Yeah, well, I like to think that if that one went up, it would be only in a local area, not the whole ring at once. but definitely, those things are so large with so much energy pouring through that if something goes out of balance, it's a mess.
Yeah, there was an article about those magnets, but boy, that was a long time ago. I can't remember it. Probably Analog does a science fact article.
Yep.
So there was probably an article about when they were putting those magnets in, something about bids and the cooling system is what I want to talk about. But anyway, I liked the part you put in about the pressure and the hurricane speed of the winds tonight. Yep. I learned something there that I enjoyed that. I enjoy the fact that you do that research. I really do.
Well, and I did that to some degree for Not Far Enough in The Last Dance, that I did a lot of research on Martian atmosphere and behavior there. I, in fact, realized very shortly, and first of all, that I had made a mistake, but second of all, and perhaps more larger impact, Andy Weir had made the same mistake in The Martian of thinking that these windstorms were physically dangerous. They're bad for visibility, they're bad for communication signals, but they are nothing for knocking over rockets or knocking over people. There's just, the air is so thin, it can't pick up anything bigger than a dust speck. Now it may throw that dust speck around at 100 plus kilometers an hour. And you know, if you got hit with enough dust specks at 100 kilometers an hour, maybe you'd notice it, but mostly what you're gonna notice is the visibility. And he has said that it was a necessary thing for the rest of the book, The Martian, to actually happen, was they had to have that storm. And he still hates it because it's the number one question he gets asked by every science geek out there. How was this possible? And the answer is, well, I blew it. And I got to be honest, of Not Far Enough, I had roughly the same sort of mistake in there. The scene where the crawler is going across the land running ahead of the storm.
Right.
I have a horrible fear of tornadoes. A family friend was caught in her house when it collapses in a tornado before I was born, but I grew up hearing that story. And then I have a cousin whose ex-husband now, but at the time was her husband, was driving his semi across the prairie when a tornado came through, picked up his entire rig, tractor and trailer, whipped it around, and set it back on the highway going the other direction. And that scared the daylights out of me, but I used it in the story because I thought it was so cool, only to, after I did the research, say, no, she around like a Matchbox car. Which is too bad because I love that scene.
It dropped out for a second, but I will hear it in the recording. yeah. Still, somebody needs to figure what would, I mean, if you got all those particles hitting you simultaneously, the pressure is rated by, you know, the number of particles that would hit you at the same time.
Yeah.
Does that make a difference?
Well, the problem is that yes, that's the basic equation, is particles per square inch times square inches and times velocity. I mean, ultimately it comes back down to the kinetic energy equation, 1/2 mv squared. And so if it's moving really fast, v squared gives it a lot more energy. But the m on something that's finer than talc is pretty low. Now, if you could get hit with an entire wall of them, an entire wall hitting you at once, yeah, a wall of talc would still knock you over at 70 miles an hour.
Yep.
But the air is so thin, you're not getting a wall. You're getting more of a fog.
Okay.
Fog enough so that it's blocking your vision, but you can cut your hand right through it and never feel that it's there.
The density is down. Okay, yeah. Got it. Thank you.
It's also why I brought that up in Not Far Enough as well. I think that made it into the final version. The fact that sound doesn't propagate well in the Martian atmosphere at all, because sound propagation is this molecule bumping into this molecule, bumping into this molecule, bumping into your ear.
Yep.
When the density is very low, the chance that this hits another molecule goes way down.
That's correct.
And so, especially the faster it's going, the less chance it has to run into another one that'll bump into another one. So the net effect is very low.
Volume again.
In conversation. And I got a little of that in Not Far Enough, where when he finally knocks the big garage door down, there's a rumble, but that's all.
Okay. The version I would have read would have been in the analog first, when it was a standalone.
Yep.
And then I wouldn't have focused as much on it the next time I read it, because right. I focused better the first read through.
Understood. I will say that the version that's in the book is about, I want to say, give or take 30% longer, because the version I wrote originally was about 32,000 words. And for analog, that's just too far. Yep. I cut it down to 25,000 and they took it. I'm not saying they've never done 32,000 words, but I knew my chances of getting accepted were better if I cut it down closer to 20. I wanted 24, I got 25 and they took it. Good. So there's little bits, but it was very judicious cutting. The characters were the same. The plot was the same. Some amount of description was cut out, but I don't want to take too much out, because part of what I'm selling, especially to an analog audience, is the feeling of being there.
Right.
And the more I can describe, the better. And historically, that's been the weakest part of my writing. The part I have to work on hardest is make sure I'm getting description in. And I'm not sure how well I'm doing in this dictation at all. But for an analog audience especially, they want to feel like they're there. And so I didn't dare cut a lot of description, but I could cut some. I cut some out of the scene of where she was digging out of the sand pile and a couple of other places. I don't remember how I got it down 7,000 words. I remember it being a painful process. All right.
Well, I enjoyed it.
About just 75 minutes and 600 calories here. So when I hit 75 minutes, I'll stop my treadmill.
Oh, good. I appreciate that you're doing a cool down.
I thank you for the suggestion. I honestly never thought of it, but it's the right suggestion. I'm so comfortable on the treadmill that, especially when I'm talking, that sometimes I forget this is actually exercise. this is a workout. I need to treat it as such. Four, three, two, one. All right. And I kill it. All right. Well, thank you.
Well, thank you very much.
I'm going to try this weekend to actually start extracting out some Vela chapters, because Vela, your first 3 chapters are supposed to be free. And I would say that I've got at least 3 chapters now. I'm not entirely sure where the chapter breaks are, although it feels like I mostly hit a chapter break at the end of the night. For whatever reason, I seem to be good at sort of, when the time is running out, seeing that, oh, what would be a good wrap up for tonight? So I mostly feel like I have a chapter ending at the end of the night. I have had a couple of times on Unit 12, the book that's with my agent right now, where I would hit the end of my time period. And those were 90-minute time periods, because I don't know, I'm doing 60 because I don't know how many people are going to have the patience to watch me for 90 minutes. But I've been doing 90 minutes, and suddenly the treadmill would stop and I would think I broke something. And no, I had a 90-minute program set up and it was 90 minutes. And I'm like, but I got 5 more minutes to reach a chapter break. So, okay, then I just stand there and finish it standing still. So, all right, well, I thank you. This will go up tonight as a video. You will see a change in the videos, because I did this Wednesday night after the talk. Okay, I gave my presentation, I took a shower, I went out and got food, I came back, I started the laundry. Oh, and I pushed the button on my medical alert. And I don't remember doing it, but all of a sudden I had calls from 911 and calls from the alarm company. So I had to deal with those. So I didn't get around to doing the transcription and the recording, processing and everything until 9:30, but I didn't get it done until instead of 1920 by 780, because the smaller videos take less time to produce and less time to upload. And I don't know that you need to see me bobbing up and down in the treadmill in HD high def. It's probably just as good as a 640 resolution. So, all right, well, thank you for your attention. Glad to have an audience, and I appreciate it. I will be sending out my newsletter, and that will have the links for next week's sessions.
Thank you very much. You have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.